everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here, live at TPM with Jens. Thanks so much for joining me.
I'm delighted to be part of it, look forward to the interview.
Yeah, have you been coming to TPM for a number of years?
No, it's actually my first time.
Wow,
Yeah.
So what's your first impression of TPM?
I think it's a great venue and, meet many interesting both vendors and customers as well and colleagues from the industry.
Yeah, so tell everybody who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your company. I'm
the CEO of DSV, a Danish freight forwarding company. Actually, we will soon be the largest player in our industry.
Wow.
We've basically grown over the years, both organically but also through M&A. And we've now basically our eyes on the #1 spot in our industry.
Wow, well let's get into that and talk about it, because the next the big question right now is around the acquisition. The DB Schenker acquisition, to be exact. So how is that going, and can you discuss sort of your vision of what it means for DSV, but also for the shipping industry at large?
I think if you look at the Schenker integration, we are getting the final clearances. It's still the EU and the US outstanding, and hopefully they should come in soon. Then actually we'll combine the two companies. Both companies have quite a few strengths, but of course in combination we will have very strong service catalog that basically we can then serve our customers in most markets, both in the ocean freight or air freight, or on the land transportation, and then of course also on contract logistics. So we will also in all geographies we will have a solid footprint. Mm-hmm. So I think from that point of view I think it's going to be great. I think our industry, as you know, needs consolidation. We will have a market share, let's say around the 7%, so still a very fragmented industry, and that's not necessarily good for the customers, because the customers today, they work with many LSPs. Mm-hmm. And it's very cumbersome for them. So let's say we could, basically provide service in more areas, mm-hmm. then they could basically take out some complexity when they work with us. So I think it's good for customers. Of course, it's also good for us. And I also believe it's good when we interact with our vendors.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations on that. That is quite a big announcement. Now, I want to talk about supply chain challenges. Yeah. What are you seeing? What are your customers facing right now as far as challenges? And how is DSV particularly well positioned to help them?
I think if you look at the supply chain right now, it's fair to say that it's not very predictable. So
you can say that twice.
And that's actually the only thing that the customers they're looking for is predictability. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of discussions, because of course companies they have been preparing for this actually for quite a while, because under the last Trump administration it already started where people had the China +1 or the nearshoring. Mm-hmm. That debate already started there, and then of course during COVID of course we saw also a lot of challenges in the supply chain. So that's been, evolving as we sort of have been moving along. So I think many companies actually have strategies where they can source from multiple places, but I think now it's also become sort of very present that it is uncertain how can they do the best sourcing. Of course, we as an LSP, we have to be able then to move the freight from the various mm-hmm. areas and advise on customs and duties, and how to get it all organized in the short run, but also in the little bit longer term. Mm-hmm. Of course, right now the visibility is low, so we focus on the short term, but that's basically the role that we play, making sure that the supply chains they are flowing for our customers, so that you and I, we get the cargo that we need in our daily lives.
Yeah, and a solid partnership, a partner for your customers as well.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it cannot just be transactional if you want to solve a structural thing. Yeah. So we have to partner up and basically also be able to have the commitments in place so that we can deliver the services that the customers they look for.
Well, a hot topic these days is AI and automation. Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about how DSV is implementing AI and automation in general? What does that look like for DSV?
I think, it's part of a journey. Let's say you started with macros and scripts way back in sort of the old systems. Then I think later on you got software robots in place. Then you got machine learning as well, which is also part of the AI thinking today. And then of course now you have the generative AI or the large language models. And of course, we then apply this to our workflows so that basically we take out, some human intervention at the end of the day and get the data quality up, so that we drive the productivity up to the benefit of ourselves, obviously, but certainly also to the benefit of our customers, so that when we present data to them or when we interact with them, it's done, based on a more solid foundation when it comes to the data. And it's an important journey that you're on, where you need to have a strategy for that, so that you really embrace the technology, because it represents an opportunity to redesign some of the things that we're doing.
Yes.
And then drive up benefits and productivity.
Yeah. And innovation, right? Drive the industry forward through innovative thinking, through AI, through automation, and we're going to see where that journey is going to take us.
Yeah, but that's sort of the thing, isn't it? You can then stay in the past, or you can be part of the future. And I think, that's exactly what we're trying to be, and to the benefit basically of all. I mean, productivity has been on the agenda for decades, hasn't it? And it's brought us so many things, and that's sort of how we improve quality of life. So of course we want to be part of that.
Absolutely. Well, Jens, thank you so much for joining me here for Live at TPM.
Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here, and I am live at TPM with Adam. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks very much. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Great. This is your second TPM, first time speaking, first time in the hot seat with me. How's
Yes.
everything going at TPM this year?
Yeah, it's been a great event so far. Part of the cold chain, so cold chain's getting a lot of action this year, which is great, and just came off the main stage. So first time I think cold chain was on the main stage maybe ever. So
Amazing.
Pretty exciting. Yeah, it's
great. That's really great to hear. I think cold chain is definitely having its moment.
Yes, it is.
All right, so for everybody, why don't you tell them who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your company?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Adam Forrest. I'm one of the co-founders and co-chairman of Lineage, which is the largest temperature-controlled warehousing REIT globally. We have about 500 warehouses in 19 countries and do cold storage on a global basis.
Amazing, amazing. Now, little birdie just told me that you have executed the largest IPO in 2024. So talk to us about the process, and what does that mean specifically for Lineage and maybe cold chain in general? And congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, it was a wild and very exciting event. We were in Times Square with NASDAQ, and it was kind of a seminal day for the company. So we started our business in 2008. We bought one warehouse in Seattle. My partner and I ran the warehouse, tried to figure out how the industry actually worked. Cold chain is a wildly fragmented place. We've done 120 acquisitions over the last 15, 16 years. We've built 60 buildings. We are a real estate business that operates on behalf of our customers. So it's capital intensive. We've raised a lot of private capital over the years. And we always knew that at some point in the company's evolution, being public and having permanent capital and having the lowest cost of capital was going to be the way that we continued our growth going forward. So that was really the impetus for the IPO, was to really raise permanent capital and create access to liquidity, reduce our balance sheet, get investment grade, and allow us to grow with our customers. And so we see it as a new beginning. It's not an exit. A lot of companies think of the IPO as the exit. It's the opposite for us. It's really a start of something new. It's really our next phase of growth. And so, yeah, it was exciting. It was a huge distraction. We spent 18 months getting ready, and it consumed a lot of resources and a lot of time. So personally, I'm happy that we're back to work, if you will, and growing the business again, and now living as a public company. So trying to keep a long-term mindset while still dealing with the short-term expectations of the market.
Well, let's talk about that long-term mindset, because I want you to get your crystal ball out a little bit.
Yep.
I want to get your thoughts on what the next 3 to 5 years in cold chain is going to look like. Like, what are the markets fundamentally telling us right now?
Yeah. So the reason we got into cold chain and cold storage in the beginning is because people need to eat. I mean, that's what it real boils down to. And cold storage is effectively the backbone of the food supply chain. Everything that's in our warehouse came from somewhere and is going somewhere else, and ultimately ending up either at the restaurant or on your kitchen table. And so we believed in the underlying fundamentals that people will increasingly want fresh and frozen food, right? It's the best way to preserve product. And domestically, that's been historically growing a couple of percentage a year. But if you look at kind of emerging markets, places like India and other places like that, when you get into 2 income earning families, that really pushes the consumption and convenience. And so global growth around temperature control is very significant. We've just come through a wild period in supply chain, and cold storage was no exception. So early COVID, we were essential workers, we were there. Mm-hmm. And the reason why you could go to the grocery store and still get food and bring it home during COVID was because we're the buffer of the food supply chain. Right. So we got through that initial crisis. Then what happened was our customers really didn't have the capacity to produce. Mm-hmm. Then they overproduced. So we saw this kind of de-inventorying and then re-inventorying, and now we're in a place where we're finally seeing stability.
A little bit of balance.
A little bit of balance within the inventory levels that our customers, and a normalcy. And getting back to normalcy is good. It allows us to do more long-term planning. And so for our business, we want to continue to help our customers get more sophisticated with their supply chains, because the supply chain is inherently wasteful, and there's a lot of opportunity to streamline that, reduce costs, but also reduce sustainability waste, so resource consumption. And then ultimately over time, and we think about this in terms of decades, is that we want to be even more global than we are today. And so supporting our customers in places where the emerging growth is. So whether that's India or Middle East or Africa or Southeast Asia, we have the resources and the technology and the intellectual property to support them and do that on a very efficient, sustainable basis on a global platform.
Yeah, and I want to talk about those sustainability initiatives. I mean, it's something that everybody is looking for when they're partnering with somebody. And Lineage is a global sustainability champion and leader from what I'm reading. So what are your primary initiatives today? And then what does that look like for the future?
Yeah. So as the largest player in our industry, and as a company that needs to keep food cold, we use a lot of energy. We use as much energy as a small country.
Wow.
And so, but this was really obvious when we got into the business. We always knew that energy was an opportunity. It was our second largest variable cost after the team that works in the warehouse. And so we've been on a long journey. I mean, we're 16 years into this, and we've been sequentially trying to reduce effectively our miles per gallon by making our buildings more efficient, right? Putting more solar on them, using control systems to optimize the entire warehouse as a system as opposed to each individual component. And so we've been able to sequentially reduce our energy consumption for the last several years, and we see more opportunity to do that in the future. We are fortunate to be in a business where if we can save energy costs, we can share that value with the customer, make a little bit more money on ourselves. So this is good business, not only just a sustainability driven goal. And then at the same time, you're reducing resource consumption. And so we have signed the climate pledge to be carbon neutral by 2040.
Great.
We're well on our way. We've got 3 buildings that are already net neutral. Wow. And that's a combination of solar, on-site generation, control systems, and efficiency of the refrigeration equipment that we're using in there. So yeah, we're on our way. There's a lot more opportunity, and we're going to keep our head down and keep doing the right thing for the business and the right thing for the planet.
Well, and I think intentionality.
Yes.
Right? Sustainability can only be done through intentionality.
100%.
Really putting it at the forefront. A lot of customers, I'm assuming RFPs, it's part of their RFPs now.
It is.
And I'm glad to hear that you're at the forefront of it, you're driving it, and you're showing what's possible.
Yes.
Which is what's needed.
There's tons of opportunity to innovate. I think we want to be on the bleeding edge of that and deploy the most advanced technologies we can and do the best we can for the customer.
Great, Adam. Well, thank you so much for joining me here at Live at TPM. Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here, live at TPM with Scott. Scott, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
All right, well, it's your first TPM, and you picked a good one. We've got almost 4,500 registrants. It's the 25th anniversary. So what's your first impressions?
Well, I mean, it's quite the scene, honestly. I didn't know shipping people were so cool and fun.
Hey,
really, look, we academics, we come from a pretty staid kind of university environment. So coming here and seeing the fun, it was a bit of a surprise.
And I think we've had some spicy conversations and some spicy guests up on stage.
Yeah.
I think you might have been one of them.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, Eric said that, when he wanted to bring me in is to be a bit more direct and critical of some of the things that are going on. And, look, as a policy analyst, I analyze policy. So I'm going to call balls and strikes. And there have been a lot of balls lately.
That's awesome. So tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Sure. I'm Scott Linscomb from the Cato Institute, Vice President of General Economics and Trade. I analyze U.S. trade policy and other economic issues. Before that, I was an international trade attorney for about 2 decades. was in the weeds of multinational supply chains and compliance, logistics, all that kind of stuff.
So how did we even get your time today? Because I think you're quite a busy guy.
It's the timing of this is in one way perfect, right? I mean, I'm the most popular person you could ask for at the moment, but at the same time, I've been answering emails all morning, not out at the beach, which is kind of unfair. I was hoping to get some beach time.
You got to do some work, especially considering the tariffs. So let's talk about it.
Yep.
Let's unlock some of your insights around the tariff turmoil sweeping global trade right now. Yeah. How chaotic would a true reciprocal tariff environment be to comply with and for the U.S. government to enforce?
Yeah, I mean, so if the current situation where we now have tariffs on Canadian imports and Mexican imports and Chinese imports, that's like a 7.5 or 8 in terms of chaos. Reciprocal tariffs would be like an 11, right?
Oh, okay, so we're not there yet.
On a 10-point scale, right.
We're at 7,
right?
Maybe 8.
Yeah,
okay.
So I'm pulling my hair out, but I still have some hair. So, but yeah, when you look at what the president wants to do, which is effectively match line by line foreign countries' tariffs on American exports to the tariffs we apply, but also pull in non-tariff barriers like subsidies and maybe even things like the metric system. It's a Herculean effort. And now I can discuss the economics and the law and all that, but for me, the practical aspects of this are really what are pretty crazy.
Right.
Because you're talking about 200 different countries, thousands of different tariff lines. I mean, if we had full reciprocity, you'd be having 3 million different tariffs that customs would have to administer. And then you get into all of the issues about rules of origin. So now all of a sudden where a product comes from is really
important.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you have supply chain reconfigurations and people trying to game the system. And then finally you have to quantify all these non-tariff barriers. I mean, what is the tariff equivalent of the metric system?
Right.
Right. What is
I have no idea.
Exactly.
Do you?
I think it's in 10, base 10. That's all we know for sure. But that's all of that type of stuff will require years of work. So at the end of the day, my concern is that they're going to fake it. There won't be this type of rigorous, accurate analysis to create a tariff equivalent. It'll just be looking at like the bilateral trade balance and then slapping on a tariff number. And that's more feasible, but it's highly inaccurate.
Right, absolutely. And it's not just you who's going to pull your hair out. It's all of the customs folks in our industry
For sure.
that are going to be tearing their hair out right now and getting ready for it. Plus, all the supply chain professionals who have to look at their supply chains and reconfigure once again.
Yeah, exactly. And game plan if it doesn't come into effect, right? Because one of the big
for long, right?
One of the other things we have going on right now is just trade policy uncertainty is off the charts. I mean, literally, the charts that economists have to measure this, it's now record
on 11.
highs. Yeah, it's on 11. And for your Spinal Tap fans out there, and so that means not just planning for what happens tomorrow, but trying to figure out what's going to happen in 6 months and 8 months. If you're qualifying new suppliers,
how do you do that?
Can take years. If you're building factories, even longer. So what happens? Well, you actually hold back on your investments. And so I think for the industry, you could actually see depressed activity, output, hiring, and investment as people just wait to see what happens or just wait for the next administration.
So is that the second order effect of tariffs, or what does that look like?
Well, it's one of the big ones, is that when you have laws that let the president turn on and turn off tariffs like he did at midnight this morning, that's one of the effects. But the other one is what will happen in response to all these tariffs. So if the U.S. dollar appreciates like the economists say it will, well, that might encourage the Trump administration to start going after currency manipulators abroad because they now have weaker currencies, and that gives them a trade advantage in the U.S. market. There might be efforts to root out these supply chain changes. So instead of China, now we're targeting Vietnam. Instead of Vietnam, maybe we're looking at Africa or other places.
I had that question the other day. Actually, I was talking to somebody, and they were like, is it going to come our way?
Of course.
In Vietnam.
Well, and if you look, we have test cases. So, we slapped tariffs on solar panels more than a decade ago, starting in China, then in Taiwan, and then a global safeguard tariff. And then that went away, and now we have tariffs from panels from Southeast
How do we
Asia.
even keep up? That's just one
Exactly.
commodity.
Well, and that's the issue. One of the things we try to explain is that, trade is like water. You can throw a boulder in the river, but the water's going to flow around it.
Right.
All the people here and watching, I mean, these tireless professionals, it's their job to get around these things, and mainly legally, by the way. And that's all going to continue. So my biggest question actually isn't what happened this morning, it's what's going to happen in a year.
So that's kind of my next question is, are we looking at other economies, or is the US looking at other economies to push tariffs through, and where do they rank in terms of tariffs and non-tariffs?
Right. So the big targets, I think, are Europe, less because of tariff barriers, but more because of non-tariff barriers, and then the developing world. So India and Brazil, I think, are your big markets that have a lot of tariff and non-tariff barriers that, even a guy like me can say, yeah, there's some bad behavior there in the trade world. But the question is, how do you actually change that behavior? For this administration, they say we want to just slap them across the face and then they'll do what we want. Well, and before we had free trade agreements, we had other ways, WTO dispute settlement, we had these other mechanisms, and they were actually pretty effective. But the government has abandoned those in the United States. And to be clear, the previous administration wasn't pursuing those things either. So there seems to be a sea change where we're going to smack first and ask questions later.
And sort of see what happens.
For sure.
And nobody can really predict what's going to happen.
That's the one question I said I didn't want to be asked on stage was what happens next.
Get out your crystal ball.
Exactly. Nobody knows.
Right, absolutely. Well, that's a good place to end. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining me here at Live at TPM. Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here, live at TPM with the one, the only, Noel. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and better that I'm now with you here, Sarah. Thank you.
I always love talking to you. Now tell everybody who you are, what you do, and a little bit about the port.
And I always love talking with you. Noel Hasagaba, Chief Operating Officer at the Port of Long Beach.
Great. And so we've been together at TPM for a number of years. It's the 25th anniversary this year. What does that mean to the Port of Long Beach?
It's not only the biggest, it's the best yet. I mean, the themes, the panels, and here in Long Beach, we have the great honor and pleasure of hosting what is the flagship conference of the entire global shipping industry. So we could not be happier to have TPM back in our backyard and celebrating the 25th anniversary.
Well, talk to us about the port and what's top of mind for you this year. What does it look like?
Well, along the lines of TPM25's theme, a lot of navigating through the uncertainty and changes in the global landscape. But I can tell you this, at the Port of Long Beach, our secret sauce is we've always stuck to our long-term plan. So we're building aggressively. We are literally building the port of the future. We have a $2.3 billion CapEx program over the next 10 years.
Wow.
We're expanding our rail footprint, and we're also enhancing our digital platform, the Supply Chain Information Highway, as we transition to zero emissions operations. So we've got a lot that's going on, and regardless of what may be taking place around us, we've got our plan and we're going to continue to execute.
I love that, because every time we talk, I feel like you're always innovating, forward thinking, thinking about the future, but really importantly, investing in that future. And that's quite a large investment.
It is. And there's a quote, Sarah, that I like to use. It's attributed to Peter Drucker, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so here at the Port of Long Beach, we are literally creating what we think the future should look like. Our investments are central to that, whether it's physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, our transition to zero emissions operations. We're looking at every possible avenue to raise our profile commercially while doing the right thing by our community.
Great. Well, talk to me. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that you're seeing at the port right now with some of your long-term vision? What does that look like?
Well, I would say in the near term, it's the uncertainty surrounding potential tariffs.
That's to say the least, right? Uncertainty.
Uncertainty is the word, right? So resilience becomes very important. And like I said, our secret sauce throughout the years in Long Beach has been to stick to our strategic plans.
Right.
And even during the supply chain crisis, we continue to build in spite of that. So we're not slowing down.
Okay.
I think we're also trying to get as much input from the shippers and the ocean carriers and all of our partners to understand what they're going to do. Because as we build out the port of the future, we want to make sure that we're building a future port for them. a port that enhances their value and puts them in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, because it's about your customers,
That's
but
right.
it's also about your customer's customer.
That's exactly
And you
right.
can't build that future without that feedback loop
Right.
and really understanding what it is that is their challenge,
Right.
is their opportunity, and how they see the future and how you can fit into that.
That's exactly right.
All right. So Katie Farmer discussed new Barstow Intermodal Gateway on stage yesterday. I have to read this so that I get it right. What will the opening mean for the Southern California ports?
We're very excited about BIG because BIG is...
Oh, that's the acronym.
It is.
Okay, thank you for that.
So it's literally a big project. But we're excited because think about it this way, Sarah. As we build out our rail infrastructure inside the port via our Pier Beyond Dock Rail Support Facility, also known as America's Green Gateway, I refer to it as Pier Beast because it's such a complex project.
You and your names. We've got Big. What did you say?
Pier Beast.
Beast?
But what we're doing in Long Beach is we're literally building the largest intermodal rail yard inside a port anywhere in the country. And so when Barstow International Gateway is built, it will be synergistic. It will help us to maximize the advantages of Pier B just by virtue of having a close by facility like Big, innovative, to be able to send all those containers. So we're excited about the project and excited about the potential that it offers, not just to us, but as you said earlier, to all of our customers and their customers.
Yeah, well, and I think it's collaboration in action.
It is. It really
and
is.
I love to see that. You know, I always say collaboration is the future of business.
And I like to say we're better together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly right.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that news and your long-term vision and the collaboration and what's top of mind and the big investments that you're making in the industry. So thank you, Noel, for joining me here live at TPM.
It's my pleasure.